I'm here to introduce my sister, Melinda Lee Ferguson. A little bit of backstory here. There's a couple of things that my sister's been doing behind the scenes and, publishing articles and really being a leader in her own company for what's the new workplace look like. And I've been forwarding some of these articles on to folks on my team at SANS and sharing it amongst my peers in the community. Because I'm really proud of what she's saying. It's cool, and she's right. Really thoughtful thinking about it. And about 2 months ago, I get this note from Heather basically saying, hey, guess who's going to keynote day 2 of the Deeper Summit with me? Your sister. I was like, oh, so I had no idea that they had reached out to her or anything along the lines. And all of a sudden she's going to be keynoting. And the idea was, and again, they'll talk about it. The idea was that they really wanted to talk about how this has changed the workplace, especially with technical teams overall. And for those of you who don't know my sister, she's executive over at VMware. She's been a leader of teams at Computer Associates. She is an inspiration to me, an inspiration in many ways to a lot of her friends. And she's an amazing, wonderful individual. And of course, she's family. So it's really hard for me to say anything else other than I'm super, super excited that she's here. My sister's currently in the UK. So one of those things that, we're saying we're handing it back to North America. She's currently doing this from the UK because of where she's currently working in VMware. And they're gone through some more strict lockdowns than we have had to go through over here. And it really, tied into a lot of her thoughts and a lot of our discussions that we've had, even though she's been overseas, has centered on how do you lead your teams? And she's asked me some of my questions. How do you lead your teams? How are you doing this? What are some of the things? And we've been sharing ideas, books, thoughts all along the way, all the way through the pandemic. So I'm really proud that she's here, and she and Heather are going to be walking through a really special discussion that I think is going to enlighten a lot of you and have a lot of you pause and think is what is work going to look like in the next couple of years? So Heather, I'm going to pass it to you and Melinda. Thank you for both being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you. All right, so how this all came about. First, I know I gave a little intro yesterday, but obviously I'm in Deeper. Melinda is not. We are not experts at all on mental health. This is just a world that we have been living in. And honestly, how this all came up, Phil and I were meeting with the summit team and talking about keynotes, and Chad's name came up. And I remember saying, I know what I need, and I need someone to talk about work-life balance and mental health, and when to say no. And Jen Santiago actually said, well, what about Melinda? She was on this panel and she did a great job. So then we started diving in. And there's a resilience blog that you wrote, and Phil's going to pop that into the Slack for everyone. But it really hit home. And Rob gets some credit here. Rob created something due to burnout called the book club. And we have this book club where sometimes we talk about investments. Sometimes we talk about just a motivational quote or Ted Lasso, which you have to look very closely behind Melinda and see her believe sign. But it's important. It's non-work talk. You're not allowed. But the issue is we're still on Zoom doing this. So there's still burnout. There's still a lot of issues. Everyone was so used to working from home, and now we're branching out and we're getting out of our COVID shells, as I like to call it. And it's causing a lot of people to reflect on work, on home, on families, on everything. So when we reevaluate work, if that's what we're calling it, because it's round the clock for many of us, a lot has changed. And that's why I really wanted you to be here to share your experience with us on how all of this is going on.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm really, really glad to be here. And thanks, Rob, for the intro. And you had to say all of those things, but I thank you for it. And Heather and Phil, I'm really glad to be here. And it's actually so exciting to see this conference and to get behind the scenes on all the work that you guys do all the time. I've obviously heard a lot about it. And it's really a privilege to be a part of it. And actually, you think about this topic, it's like, I've seen your agenda. It's quite in-depth and interesting, and you're out there finding evil and protecting us all. And, how does this topic get into the middle of this agenda? And I think, my perspective, and kind of leading back to where that blog came from, I work for VMware. I run the UK and Ireland business. And, at the beginning of the pandemic, we were, VMware, part of our business is technology that enables the anywhere workspace. So a lot of what we were doing was helping our customers build work from home capabilities, like really quick, like amazingly fast. It was probably the largest live POC that you could ever have experienced, of putting that kind of technology in place that gave employees the ability to work from home, to secure endpoints. It was a massive effort. But what was really interesting is that every conversation you would have with a customer, the technology actually took second place. The conversation that customers wanted to have, that teams wanted to have, that people wanted to have, that our own teams wanted to have, was all around the people. Like, how is everyone doing? And how are we managing through the situation that we found ourselves in very quickly as we went into the pandemic? And it's really interesting to see how that time has evolved over the course of the last year, and how the change and the uncertainty has been kind of consistent. And at the beginning, there was this real kind of, we're going to be resilient, and everyone like have a lot of grit and like just get through. And as it went on, and Rob mentioned in the UK, we have been locked down, like full, especially in England, full country lockdown for a good part of 2020 and into 2021. I wrote this blog kind of when does resilience start to wear off and kind of become counterproductive, and like, how do we take care of ourselves so you can ultimately take care of your teams? And then it kind of has shifted, I think, some of the blog content to exactly what you were talking about, Heather, of, okay, now we're coming out of this, and we all got used to working from home. There was an evolution of staying in touch via Zoom and now Zoom fatigue. And there's so many different things happening as you think about going back to the office. Some people were calling it return to work. And I was like, no, we've been working the entire time. It's return to the office. And what do people expect coming back to the office? And how are we thinking about that kind of flexibility? What have we learned? And how do we take what we've learned over the last year and some of the positives of what we've learned and carry it forward? So I think there's so much to unpack in the conversation around, again, like work-life balance, taking care of yourself, into how do you really listen to your teams, and how do companies build organizations that have purpose and build connected environments for their employees going forward. So that's kind of a lot of what I actually end up talking about all the time with customers around this topic.
So here's kind of a personal question before we get into all the work stuff, but your family is in the United States. You were locked down in the UK. So what did that look like for you? Did you just work around the clock? What was your world like?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again on these topics, and I think you and I discussed like when we were preparing for this conversation, I'm no expert in any of these topics. It just happens to be things that I experienced myself and got really curious about, after talking about this so much with customers and employees and team members. But yes, I had just moved to the UK. I landed with my dog on February 23rd, and we had lockdown just a month later in the UK, and then we were in full lockdown. So I was in a new job and a new company where I'm actually the leader of the UK, with a bunch of new people that I really had not been able to build relationships with yet, and then far from home, and it kind of a really at that point of the pandemic, a super anxiety filled situation. And the thing is, the one thing about the COVID-19 pandemic is that really we were all in the same boat. And there was in some ways, although that was obviously super challenging, it did help build some community and some connectivity, and some real ability to look at hey, how do we take care of people, and how do we take care of our teams, our employees, ourselves, so we can kind of manage through this situation. So yeah, but there's so many different stories. I often joke, I don't know if it was easier being by myself, or if I had, a family of 6 where I was homeschooling. And I know that your situation was probably more like that, not a family of 6, but certainly, certainly the homeschooling aspect.
If I had a family of 6, I would look like your brother, hair-wise.
Exactly.
That out there.
Yes.
Yeah. So you know what? People are already commenting in the Slack, and I love this. And we want you to kind of drive this conversation. But already the stress of return to office, there's comment, I don't want to go back. How do you think workplaces should deal with, or what recommendations do you give as a leader in your workplace on understanding the mental health and the mental aspect of the stress of returning into the office?
Yeah, so there's so many different things that are going on here. So I think we see right now the wide range of companies, and what they're doing relative to, hey, everyone's going to come back to the office, which I think is actually the least common of, like, we're going to require everyone to come 5 days a week. There's, remote working, I think, is here to stay. And I think it's something that it's actually going to be demanded by a lot of employees, of people seeking work, of talent, and that flexibility. We've definitely proven that productivity can actually go up when we're in a remote environment. We don't need to be checking on everyone. We don't need to see people in front of us to be productive. And I think the more that companies can recognize that, I think that it is something that, we look at VMware. We're full flexible going forward. So if someone wants to be in the office 5 days a week, we've got a spot for you. If someone's remote and isn't anywhere near an office, I mean, it gives us, the ability to hire in places that we never would have been able to before, and access, different groups of talent. Or you have flexible, where you're going to be in the office sometimes and be at home sometimes. So I think right now what we're seeing is giving our team members the ability to choose kind of eases that anxiety, because you have groups of people, like if you think about those that are younger in their career, like Gen Z. I mean, think about it, like when I started my career, like going to the office was super important for, friends, for, learning your job. And there's absolutely, we have a group of interns in the UK with VMware that they never met each other. And it's such an interesting intern year. And so there's a lot of people who want to get back to the office, but then conversely, there's people who are really nervous about it. And so I think building that flexibility into how you think about going back to the office is super important. And that's what I'm kind of seeing right now.
What do you think? And I'm seeing this in our chat. And I didn't even think about this one when we were planning our questions, but the commute. So some people are saying they have over a 90-minute commute. We work during that time now, which isn't that also kind of a problem? We used to have that time where you weren't physically working in your car unless you're on a train or something and you could work.
Right. So I think, again, it's such an interesting aspect. So there was a point during the pandemic where I said, oh, I would love to get in my car and have to drive an hour every day to get to the office. Because right now what happens is you get up, you're right at work, and there's never a shutdown. There's never that, hey, I'm gonna listen to some music, or I'm gonna even take a phone call and get in the car and drive somewhere. So I think in some aspects I've missed that commute, but absolutely I think it's the commute is also a huge cause of stress. And if you can take that away on a regular basis, I think that also, promotes productivity and mental health and well-being. And but I think a lot of it, again, has to go back to choice and giving people the flexibility to remove that kind of stress from their lives and while they do their work.
Yeah, you know what? Jess just made a comment in the Slack that some of my only personal time I get in my life, this is going to sound very sad, is on an airplane. It really is. I do not get Wi-Fi on airplanes. I try not to text people. I try not to talk to people because that is truly the only time where it's not Heather, mom, I have a question. So for me, that was stripped away. And then there was nothing. So the fact that I'm flying again, I cannot wait for an international flight. I don't even know what I'm going to do with myself. I'm going to like cheer in my seat. I'll probably get delayed and then be complaining, but that's truly my only time, which is unhealthy. It's very unhealthy.
Yeah, well, I totally agree. And it's funny, I have another colleague that said that the window seat of, 7A was her happy place for exactly those reasons of no one can get you in the airplane. And at one point they were talking about being able to take calls on the plane. It was like, no, I can't have that. But I think even like, look, these kinds of issues were around before the pandemic of work-life balance. And I think what we've learned over the last year and a half is that you can work from home, you can be remote, and it's all about figuring out how to strike that balance. We almost went the other way of then everything was blurred, and all day long into the evening, like there weren't these stop points of a commute or of a flight or places where you stopped working. And I think it's really important that you build in those barriers now and that you get like real rest. And I think taking care of yourself really requires management in a remote environment where you don't have any colleagues that are saying, hey, come grab a cup of coffee with me, or let's go get a drink after work, or, hey, can you look at this thing? Or just that distraction from the constant work.
So what about mental health versus physical health? How do you think people are weighing it and considering it? Because I know mental health has been taboo for a really long time. You don't talk about it because you have a problem. I know many people in law enforcement, if you talk about it, you could possibly lose your gun and your badge. And there's so many ups and downs on it's been just hide it, deal with it, and suppress it. And now that's changing because we need to talk about it more than ever. So what are your thoughts on mental and physical as a priority?
Yeah. So if you think about, obviously physical health has been a priority in the workplace for a really long time. The US has a private healthcare based system where employers largely fund, amazing healthcare programs, usually for their employees. I think the whole topic of mental health and well-being has made a massive shift to being front and center as a conversation to have. And you can read so many different articles and information around how mental health is not taboo, that well-being is a strategic decision, that if employees are mentally in the right space, they're more likely to stay, they're more likely to be happier and more productive, and it actually increases the bottom line results of the organization when it's a focus area. But I think there's a couple key things to think about. It really has to be, sometimes well-being programs and mental health conversations, like an old view of it is it's owned by HR or it's an HR program. And I think where the conversation is integrated through the organization and it's something that senior leaders are talking about relative to well-being and how they're taking care of themselves or their families or the team, I think it has to be a conversation and seen throughout the organization, just not as an HR conversation. And a lot of role modeling around the conversation of mental health and well-being. And there's so many aspects of mental health and well-being that you can consider. It's there's of keeping employees engaged and providing programs like, at VMware, we did. VMware had an amazing program where they added 10 pandemic days for every employee during the last year, where we have, days off once a quarter that the whole company takes off, which is really nice because no one is supposed to send an email on those days off. So it's different than having your own day off because the whole company is off. And having real well-being programs where there's money invested in building that well-being. And we also have programs around mental health first aiders that we build a program in the company where there's people who are trained to be individuals that can talk to those who might need an ear every once in a while. So I think there's a lot of different things we're seeing that companies are doing. VMware, those are just some of the examples, but the topic, I think the final thing I'll say on it, and we can move on, or we can dive deeper, is, younger generation, I think, Gen Z employees in particular, and, there's actually, there's like 5 generations that we work with now in our workforces. But I think it's something that we're seeing with younger employees, that it's really demanded, like our ability to talk about these tough subjects and well-being, and what are we going to provide them with from a well-being perspective, is critically important in how they make their decisions on where they work.
Excellent. So there's other points coming into the Slack. And actually, I was rereading all your blogs again last night, and you made a statement that 1 in 4 people are leaving their current job coming out of this pandemic. So I know that this is a big time where we're refocusing on what is our purpose. Is it worth it? Is it worth all the hours we spend? But how can you give any advice on work-life balance? Like, how can we do a better job?
So I think, so there's 2 different ways to maybe answer that question. One is from, when you think about, like for yourself or as an employee, and you're coming out of the pandemic and coming out of the situation that we're in, getting back into the real world, anything like this would causes people to reevaluate, to take stock in how you're spending your time. And, actually it's a privilege to be able to take stock. And I recognize that to be able to have choice and to make choices about where you work, how hard you're working. It used to be a badge of honor, the 100-hour work week, the busy is like, it's something like, for me personally, I probably really carried around as like, yeah, I'm going to be the hardest worker. And, it's not sustainable. And I think a lot about, everyone is looking at, is this, taking the time as you come out of the pandemic, is this a place I want to stay? And I think you have to really evaluate, what is the company or the work that you're doing allowing you to stay connected outside of work. Like, how are you able to balance? Are you able to rest? There's an article about like the 7 types of rest. It's just not physical rest, but are you able to be creative? Are you able to be inspired in where you're working? And are there programs and a real commitment from your company or who you're working with to kind of help provide that balance and recognize there is more to life than work? And I think those are choices that that people are making right now. I think there isn't a phenomenon that's taking place that this is a good time, coming out of what we're coming out of, to reevaluate and take a look at what's out there. And I do think the job market is, and especially in technology, is kind of on fire. And so there are a lot of opportunities. And so companies need to be thinking about this topic of how are we not going to work everyone to death, but kind of keep balance and well-being at the top of the focus areas. So I don't know. I definitely don't have the all the answers, but it's something that I know that we're looking at quite a bit. And I became really curious about this because it's been a shift for me personally as a leader in, driving an organization and wanting to achieve results, and how much are we really asking for from our people. And, I have Ted Lasso behind me. There's a great article in the Wall Street Journal by Ben Cohen from last week about how every coach wants to be a Ted Lasso coach. And it's all about how tyranny is out and empathy is in. And it's a really good read that I think kind of epitomizes where a lot of work and coaching and leadership is going. So it's worth a read.
That's fantastic. And you know what? There's one question in here that you could probably quickly answer before I move into something else that you just spurred me to think of. For your 1 in 4 people leaving the workplace, are they fully quitting or are they moving into a different job?
Yeah, I actually don't know the answer to that. And that's there's probably a link in my blog that's from a report. That's not a VMware statistic, but it's definitely a phenomenon that we're seeing throughout, I think, the industry in general. And I think it's probably a good mix of doing something totally different. But some of it is just switching to a different company, like needing a fresh look and a fresh perspective.
And what you were just saying, this really hits me because I feel like this is impacting my personal life. I have a great team at Sands. I have a great team at Celebrate. I love the people I work with. So often my mental outlet is to continue hanging out with them virtually when work is supposed to end. But it's my sounding board because they are the only people who know what we're doing and how this feels and what's going on. Whereas my husband now, he gets to leave the house every day. He gets to go out and see people and experience fresh air. And I'm here in my little office chamber, and it's a constant battle. So one of this, is that healthy? And I guess that's to each their own. But two, do you find that during this pandemic, we have bonded more with the people that are in it with us in our workplace than we have even outside friends and family?
Well, I think that was probably natural. Like if you think about how our work lives and personal lives have come together. I don't know how many times, I have a little dog, he's running around in the background or barking, and every single person on my entire team knows who Frisco is. And he's made an appearance on multiple videos, and or you get to know everyone's kids or spouses or partners and or friend, or they've got a guitar in the background and, oh, you play, we'll play a few. You learn, honestly, we've learned more about each other. That's been, I think, really good for connecting. And it's natural that, work has been intense, I think, over the last year and a half, that you're going to naturally build strong relationships with the people you work with and then want to talk about what happened during the day. So then to your point, Heather, you don't get away to, focus on something else. I think in that kind of situation, what we really have to start doing now, and even with my team, is, we turn off Zoom. Like we try to have Zoom-free Fridays. And you know what? We actually talk on the phone. And it is a different thing to talk on the phone than it is to have a Zoom. I'm not sure exactly why. It has to do with just a different feel of how you're communicating. And so I think it's almost changing the setting of, like, when you find yourself in that situation of, and look, you're going to get back on the road and you're going to see people in person. And I think that's when I notice the most of what we've been missing, is when you do get together in person, it's like, oh, I thought I was connected, but there's so much you miss, being virtual. So, but yeah, I think you probably need to balance it with some outside time as well. Maybe leave with your husband every once in a while and get away from the laptop. But I do think it's about changing the setting, and switching it up a little bit and putting some things in place that kind of get you away from, what can be a relentless pace of work.
I set rules for myself at one point where I'm like, I will touch fresh air for 10 minutes every day. And I'm failing miserably at that again. But this has been a very busy week. And that's what I say. Oh, this is a busy week. It'll be better tomorrow. Tomorrow I'll do that. But my team at Celebrate, we have this little dream team that we encourage each other and try to encourage each other to get fresh air, get off the Zoom. Why are you still working? And then take a break, do these things. And it's really important. And even someone in the chat made that people don't ever say, how are you? It's so important. And I'm lucky in every team that I am a part of with Sands and Celebrate. We always do that. And it's funny, the Israelis call it pleasantries. They'll do pleasantries for a few minutes first and then back to work. But it's important to say, how are you?
Yeah, there's all kinds of good stuff that people are doing, like a quick breathing exercise at the beginning of a Zoom, or honestly, that question of how are you? No, how are you? Like, how are you doing? Like, pause, like, and don't give me the, yeah, fine, here's what I got to talk to you about, but like, have a conversation about what's going on. Like, and that sounds so silly. That's an obvious statement, but we're moving so quickly and we forgot, like, the time is clicking away and you got to get onto the next Zoom and wrap it up. And some of that will hopefully, as we get in this hybrid environment, hopefully that will change, where we're in person and we're on Zoom. We're really going to have to transition in a really interesting way. But just to a point about that you made about your team, some of those behaviors, like, for instance, taking time off, or, those things have to be celebrated. Like, it has to be kind of a thing that's expected, and that, ending your evening and time to go have a dinner is something that is it's an expected thing, but it's hard. Like that's where I think the lines blur, and we really have to be, disciplined with ourselves and our teams and everyone we're working with to make sure that we take care of each other.
So what do you recommend if anyone's trying to evaluate their purpose at work, at home, all the things? Do you have any recommendations on sound ways to not make a rash decision?
So, okay. Like, you mean like in terms of like, I've had it, I'm out of here.
Yes.
I gotta leave. I'm leaving leaving this laptop and this Zoom behind. So look, I think right now, like what I try, like right now, even for myself, because like the world is changing and we were in the pandemic really quickly and we had no choice. Now we're coming out of it, and actually there's all kinds of choice, and it's another kind of exhausting of like, how do you decide what to do? And so I think it's a time where you can honestly say, like, just place pause on like a major drastic decision and just kind of sit with it for a minute. And so that is what you're feeling really how you feel, or is it like the circumstances that we find ourselves in? And that, no matter what, last year has been crazy, whether someone loves like, oh my gosh, I love working from home, I never want to leave here again, and it's been the best thing ever, and now you maybe have to leave, or it's been like, I've been stuck at home for a year and a half, like get me out of this place. I think it's been difficult, and any kind of change like that just requires a little bit of pause and just to kind of sit in the moment and really evaluate how you're feeling. So I try and say, no major decisions for 3 months. Like, will I feel exactly the same in 3 months? And if you do, like, you put a little X in your calendar, then you kind of know, okay, this is kind of perpetuating itself, it's sticking around. And so that's how I think about that. But because you know what, at the end of the day, when you think about your purpose, or when I think about my purpose at work, and if that's changing and you're no longer inspired by what you do have to find something that's going to inspire you every day. But I think there's so much that's gone on that you have to give it a little bit of time to see if you've really lost that passion or that inspiration, or if it's just kind of you're in the circumstance that we're in. I think that's kind of how I think about it.
That was really good. That was an excellent answer.
Oh,
that's what we should have ended with. That was fantastic. Geez. Yeah. So we do also this Deeper Fit, and Catherine Headley of Magnet. So many have been really, really good at pushing Deeper Fit. And I was at a random doctor's appointment, and it was the best doctor I've ever seen in my life, where she wanted to sit down and just talk first, which kind of weirded me out. And this was for a regular doctor's appointment. But she asked about working out. And I was like, oh yeah, that's my mental outlet. And she's like, but the issue is your mental outlet also strains your body. So how is that a full release? What else do you do for yourself? And that, honestly, that appointment really got me thinking about what else do I do? So what do you do for your mental outlet?
Yeah. So so for me, so look, that's kind of changed a lot. And actually in my blog, I talked about how it's like for a while, and even I would say before the last year and a half, it was probably more distraction. I would call it distraction relaxation, where, you start watching, you're binge watching some Netflix show, or, it's just like you're kind of brain dead in a little bit, and like watching something or just getting absorbed in something like that. And that wore off. Like, that was no longer relaxing for me. And what I found was I had to be engaged in something non-screen related. So I started listening to podcasts a lot, of like when I was cooking, or then I got into gardening. Like, I've got a jungle outside on my patio, basically, of plants that I've been growing, some not so successfully, sadly. But I had to have some things where I could use my hands, and then also like podcasts. And the other thing that I found was if I needed to be engaged mentally, so like there's something that I said of one time, I took a day and a half and I did my taxes myself. And I was surprised, like I found it, like, I was like, oh, that was kind of fun, because it was, which sounds really, I need to get a life, but it sounds terrible, but it was using my brain in a different way than like, trying to solve work problems or dealing with a work issue. And so then it got me thinking about what else can obviously I don't want to do my taxes all the time. That's like very sad. So it's finding those types of things where I can use my brain in a different way, or listen versus watching a screen. Reading, but the challenge I was having with reading, and I do read a lot, but as like a real relaxation kind of distraction technique was, or not distraction, but revitalization technique is I would get tired like really easily sitting down and reading. And so anyway, those are some of the things that I do.
I like those. You know what? I need to get back to mine. I do puzzles, and many of you have seen me on a Zoom, and I will do a puzzle while I'm talking to you. Your brother calls me out sometimes for not paying attention to the Zoom while doing my puzzle, but it's a mental outlet for me. And cooking is a big thing too. I love to cook, but here's my but. See, I keep making excuses, but something else needs my attention. I really need to I'm getting back to it next week. I'm going to do these great things.
Yeah. The thing is, I think, Heather, like you also don't have to put such pressure on yourself of doing it all at once. Like just finding one thing, like just baby steps, one thing at a time, and to figure out how to get some balance. And then I think it becomes consumable. It's because you're not saying, oh, I have to do this every day and make such a big shift at one time. But over time, I think it becomes a little bit easier. And I'm like talking to myself here as well. Like I go through phases of where I'll be super in control and balanced. And then I go through phases where it's like, oh, just really just all work all the time. And it doesn't feel good. And I know the thing is I'm a terrible leader when I'm like that, really. And the people that work for me, my team members would say, yep, you need to take a break. And because, you get too intense and you're not able to build that perspective into the conversation. So yeah, for myself, I have to do that.
We all need to take our own advice, I guess. I seriously feel like you're like speaking to me directly with all these things. Like this is a good counseling session for me. I needed this. And now thousands of people got to see it. Thank you.
Yeah. Hopefully it resonates. Like, look, I know it's a strange conversation in this conference probably, but it's top of mind for everyone. Like you talk to anyone about these topics around, what is it going to look like when we go back to the office, or well-being at work, or how do you really create, I think a balance is probably even an old term for it, but you create, a equilibrium in your life. I think people want to talk about it. So I appreciate you asking me to come and have the conversation.
It was fantastic. Thank you, Melinda.
Thank you so much. Have a great conference.